A corrupt judge disrespects a black officer with vile, racist remarks. But karma doesn't wait. Within minutes, the judge's arrogance backfires in the most dramatic way possible. This is the story of justice served, raw, real, and unscripted. The courtroom falls silent as Judge Richard Harmon's voice cuts through the air like a knife. "This court doesn't need lectures from affirmative action hires," he spits, glaring down at Detective Marcus Washington from his elevated bench. A collective gasp ripples through the room. Attorneys freeze mid-motion. The court reporter's fingers hover above her keyboard. For 3 excruciating seconds, no one breathes. Detective Washington stands perfectly still at the witness stand, his expression betraying nothing but professional composure. 20 years on the force has taught him to armor himself against such moments. Only the slight tightening of his jaw and the almost imperceptible straightening of his spine reveal the impact of the judge's words. District Attorney Elena Rodriguez jumps to her feet. "Objection! Your Honor, this is completely inappropriate." Her voice trembles with barely controlled outrage. Judge Harmon's face reddens as he slams his gavel. "Sit down, counselor. I run this courtroom, not social justice warriors." No one notices the young clerk quietly slipping out the side door, or the subtle nod exchanged between Marcus and someone sitting in the back row, or that Detective Washington's hand is slowly moving toward his breast pocket. What happens next will shock everyone in this room. 6 hours earlier, Marcus stands before the bathroom mirror in his modest suburban home, methodically knotting his navy blue tie. The weight of today's testimony sits heavy on his shoulders. He studies his reflection, the slight grey at his temples, the faint lines around his eyes, badges of his 20 years serving a system that hasn't always served him back. On his dresser sit several framed photos. Marcus at his police academy graduation, young and idealistic. Marcus with his wife and son at a community awards dinner. Marcus coaching Little League in the same neighborhood where he grew up. A life built on integrity and service. His phone buzzes. Captain Reynolds, his mentor since his rookie days. "You ready for today?" Reynolds asks, concern evident in his voice. "As ready as I'll ever be," Marcus replies, gathering his notes. "The evidence is solid." "Watch yourself with Harmon," Reynolds warns. "That man has been handing out suspicious rulings for years, always favoring the rich and connected, and he's not exactly subtle about his views on black officers testifying in his courtroom." Marcus sighs. "I've heard. Just stick to the facts. Don't let him bait you." After hanging up, Marcus opens a file folder on his kitchen table. Inside are months of meticulous investigation. Financial records showing Senator Williams accepting bribes from Maxwell Industries, the company building toxic factories in predominantly black neighborhoods, including the one near where Marcus's own nephew developed severe asthma last year. Beside these are notes on Judge Harmon's suspicious pattern of dismissing cases against wealthy defendants, particularly those connected to Maxwell Industries. Too many coincidences to ignore. Marcus remembers standing in the rain 3 weeks ago, watching Judge Harmon and Senator Williams chatting and laughing together outside the courthouse parking garage. Too familiar for a judge presiding over the senator's case. Marcus responds evenly. 20 years on the force, Your Honor. 15 in major crimes, specializing in corruption cases. Advanced certification in forensic accounting, and 3 years with the Financial Crimes Task Force. Harmon replies, clearly dissatisfied with an answer he can't dismiss. And yet you expect this court to take these interpretations of complex financial matters at face value. The memory shifts to last spring, when Marcus's son asked him a question that still haunts him. They had been discussing Marcus being passed over for promotion despite his exemplary record. "Dad, why keep fighting in a system that's rigged against people who look like us?" Marcus had placed his hands on his son's shoulders, because justice matters most when it's hardest to achieve, and because our community deserves someone who won't back down. As Marcus drives to the courthouse, He thinks about the FBI agents working behind the scenes, the careful trap they've laid together. Today isn't just about one corrupt senator or one prejudiced judge. It's about exposing the entire rotten system. He parks his car and takes a deep breath. In his 20 years wearing the badge, no day has mattered more than this one. What no one in that courtroom realizes, not even Judge Harmon, is that justice today will come in a form no one expects. The magnificent oak doors of courtroom 237 seem to swallow Marcus as he enters. Morning light streams through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. The room buzzes with anticipation, journalists scribbling notes, law students whispering excitedly, citizens drawn by the rare spectacle of a powerful senator facing corruption charges. Marcus feels every eye follow him as he walks the center aisle. At the prosecution table, District Attorney Elena Rodriguez gives him a subtle nod of encouragement. Her reputation for tackling corruption cases precedes her, brilliant, uncompromising, and one of the few Latina women to reach her position in the state's history. In the back row, almost invisible among the spectators, sits FBI agent James Chen. To most, he appears to be just another observer, his attention seemingly focused on his phone. Only Marcus knows he's documenting everything. As Marcus takes the stand and is sworn in, he surveys the room. Senator Williams sits with his defense team, exuding the practiced confidence of a man accustomed to escaping consequences. His expensive suit and carefully rehearsed concerned expression can't hide the nervous tapping of his fingers against the table. Judge Richard Harmon peers down from his bench, his gaze calculating. He shuffles papers unnecessarily, making Marcus wait before acknowledging him. "Detective Washington," Harmon finally says, emphasizing Marcus's title with subtle condescension. "Let's try to keep this brief, shall we? The court's time is valuable." DA Rodriguez begins her questioning, leading Marcus through the evidence methodically. Marcus explains the financial records showing irregular payments from Maxwell Industries to offshore accounts linked to Senator Williams, payments that coincided perfectly with the senator blocking environmental regulations that would have cost the company millions. Judge Harmon sighs audibly throughout Marcus's testimony, making a show of checking his watch. When Marcus presents the most damning evidence, emails between the senator and Maxwell executives, the judge interrupts. "Detective, what exactly are your qualifications for financial analysis?" Harmon asks, his tone deceptively casual. Marcus feels the first prickle of warning at the base of his neck. This isn't standard questioning. "The evidence speaks for itself, Your Honor. The money trail is clear." Harmon waves his hand dismissively. "Let's move on. I find this portion of the testimony speculative at best." DA Rodriguez straightens, surprise flashing across her face. "Your Honor, these financial records are central to establishing—" "I've made my ruling, Counselor." Harmon cuts her off sharply. "If you're feeling that something's not right about Judge Harmon's behavior, you're not alone. This is just the beginning." As Marcus continues his testimony, detailing the timeline of the senator's suspicious meetings with Maxwell executives, Judge Harmon's interruptions become more frequent and hostile. "Detective Washington," Harmon interjects after a particularly damning piece of evidence. "In my experience, certain officers who are, shall we say, rapidly promoted, often miss crucial investigative steps. Are you absolutely certain about these allegations?" The racial undertone is unmistakable. A murmur ripples through the courtroom. Marcus takes a deliberate breath before answering. "I've personally verified every piece of evidence presented today, Your Honor, multiple times, with outside experts confirming my findings." DA Rodriguez attempts to redirect. "Detective Washington, please continue explaining the surveillance photos showing Senator Williams accepting—" "Detective," Harmon interrupts again, louder this time. "Let's back up. Who authorized this surveillance? Was proper procedure followed? I find it concerning that an officer with your background might not fully grasp the constitutional implications." The spectators' murmurs grow louder. One journalist exchanges a shocked glance with another. Even Senator Williams's attorney looks uncomfortable with the judge's tone. At the clerk's desk, Sarah Mills shifts in her seat, eyes darting between Judge Harmon and the exit door. She's worked for Harmon for 3 years, but the distress on her face suggests she's never seen this side of him so publicly displayed. Marcus maintains his professional demeanor, though a muscle twitches in his jaw. All surveillance was conducted with proper warrants, Your Honor, as documented in the case file submitted to this court 2 weeks ago, signed by Judge Millison from the Eastern District. Harmon's face darkens at the mention of Judge Millison, a well-respected jurist known for her impartiality. Detective Washington, Harmon says, voice rising, I'm growing tired of your attitude. Remember where you are and who you're addressing. Marcus notices Agent Chen sit forward slightly, his hand moving to his pocket, a signal they'd discussed. Things are escalating exactly as they predicted. Your Honor, Marcus responds, his voice steady despite the tension building inside him. I'm simply presenting the evidence as what? Harmon snaps. As someone who clearly benefited from lowered standards and quotas. This court doesn't need lectures from affirmative action hires. The courtroom erupts. D.A. Rodriguez leaps to her feet, face flushed with anger. Objection, Your Honor, this is completely inappropriate. Harmon pounds his gavel. Sit down, counselor. I run this courtroom, not social justice warriors. Marcus's mind flashes back to 3 weeks earlier. A secure room at the FBI field office. Agent Chen laying out surveillance photos on a steel table. Judge Harmon has been on our radar for years, Chen had explained, showing Marcus images of the judge meeting with Maxwell Industries executives. But he's careful, never takes payments directly, uses intermediaries, offshore accounts. Elena Rodriguez had nodded. We've had 6 cases against Maxwell thrown out by him on technicalities, always with the same pattern. But we've never had enough for charges, Marcus had asked. No, Chen replied. He's too smart to leave an obvious trail, but he has another weakness. Chen had placed another file on the table. His prejudice, especially against minority officers who testify in his courtroom. The file contained statements from 5 officers, 3 black, 2 Latino, all describing similar experiences. Harmon undermining their testimony, questioning their qualifications, making veiled racial comments. He thinks he's untouchable, Rodriguez had explained. But what if we could get him to reveal his true nature in open court, with witnesses and recordings? In the present, Marcus feels the weight of the recording device in his breast pocket. The trap they'd set required something they were almost certain Judge Harmon would provide, a public display of prejudice so blatant it couldn't be explained away. As Harmon continues his tirade, Marcus catches Agent Chen's second signal, a subtle tap on his chest. The moment has arrived. They'd gambled that Harmon's arrogance and prejudice would overcome his caution. They'd been right. Now it was time to close the trap. A heavy silence falls over courtroom 237 as Judge Harmon's words hang in the air. The gavel's echo fades, leaving only the soft sound of the court reporter's fingers frozen above her keyboard. Marcus Washington stands perfectly still at the witness stand. 2 decades of facing prejudice has taught him to control his expression, but this moment is different. This time, he's been waiting for this exact line to be crossed. Slowly, deliberately, he reaches into his breast pocket. Your Honor, Marcus says, his voice carrying clearly through the stunned courtroom. I'd like to enter something else into evidence. Between his fingers he holds a small black recording device, its red light blinking steadily. Judge Harmon's face transforms, confusion, then realization, then fury washing over his features in rapid succession. What is the meaning of this? Harmon sputters, rising slightly from his chair. I did not authorize any recordings in my courtroom. Bailiff, confiscate that device immediately. But Marcus is already speaking, his voice calm yet commanding enough to freeze the approaching bailiff mid-step. This recording device was authorized by federal warrant as part of an ongoing corruption investigation, Marcus says, each word measured and precise. Every word spoken in this courtroom today has been documented and witnessed, including your inappropriate and prejudiced remarks. The bailiff hesitates, looking uncertainly between the judge and the detective. Judge Harmon's face has turned an alarming shade of crimson. "This is outrageous. I will have you held in contempt. I will have your badge for this. You have no authority." "He doesn't need it, but I do." All heads turn toward the voice from the back of the courtroom. FBI agent James Chen stands, badge held high. At the same moment, the side door opens, and Sarah Mills, the court clerk, re-enters, followed by three stern-faced individuals in formal attire, their expressions grave. "Members of the State Judicial Conduct Committee," Elena Rodriguez announces, rising from her seat. "Present by prior arrangement to witness these proceedings. What would you do if you saw someone who thought they were above the law suddenly realize they weren't? Click that like button if you've ever wanted to see justice catch up to someone who deserved it." Judge Harmon's rage transforms to panic. He fumbles for his gavel, knocking it sideways. "This court is adjourned. Everyone out. This is a setup. This is..." The main doors of the courtroom swing open with a dramatic bang. Two more FBI agents stride purposefully down the center aisle. The crowd parts instinctively before them. "Richard Harmon," the lead agent announces, voice ringing with authority as they approach the bench. "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of accepting bribes in the amount of $450,000 from Maxwell Industries, obstruction of justice, and witness intimidation." A collective gasp ripples through the courtroom. Phones rise in the air as spectators capture the unbelievable scene unfolding before them. A journalist in the front row whispers frantically into her recorder. Law students exchange wide-eyed glances of disbelief. "This is absurd!" Harmon shouts, backing away until he hits the wall behind his chair. "I am a federal judge. You cannot simply..." "We can and we are," the agent replies calmly, unfolding the warrant. "Please step down from the bench, sir." For a brief moment, it seems Harmon might refuse. His eyes dart wildly around the room, searching for an ally, an escape, anything. His gaze lands on Senator Williams, who deliberately turns away, suddenly fascinated by his own hands. The courtroom erupts into chaos. Reporters rush for the doors, eager to break the story. Spectators stand on tiptoes for a better view. The defense attorneys for Senator Williams huddle together in urgent, whispered conference. Through it all, Marcus Washington remains a pillar of composure. His face betrays neither triumph nor anger, only the quiet satisfaction of a job thoroughly done. As the FBI agents climb the steps to the bench, Judge Harmon seems to physically shrink. The imposing figure who minutes ago wielded the gavel of justice with such arrogant authority now looks small, ordinary, vulnerable. One of the agents begins reciting Miranda rights. The other takes out handcuffs, not the discreet modern zip ties sometimes used for white-collar criminals, but traditional metal cuffs that gleam under the courtroom lights. "You set me up?" Harmon finally manages to ask, staring directly at Marcus, disbelief written across his face. Marcus approaches the bench, close enough to be heard over the commotion, but not so close as to interfere with the arrest. "No, Your Honor," he says, his voice low but firm. "Your prejudice and corruption did that all by themselves. I just made sure everyone would hear it." Elena Rodriguez steps forward, adding her own revelation to the moment. "Judge Richard Harmon, the FBI has been monitoring your activities for the past 11 months, she states, loud enough for the entire courtroom to hear. "We have documented 7 separate instances where you accepted bribes from Maxwell Industries through offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands." The handcuffs click shut around Harmon's wrists, the sound cutting through the noise like a period at the end of a sentence. We have traced $450,000 in payments connected to cases you dismissed involving Maxwell's environmental violations, Rodriguez continues. Cases that affected predominantly minority communities. Senator Williams rises abruptly, whispering urgently to his attorney. His face has gone ashen. In the gallery behind him, two executives from Maxwell Industries exchange panicked glances before edging toward the exit. And now, Marcus adds, holding up the recording device once more, we have your racist remarks as evidence of your character and bias, which will be reviewed in context with every case you've ever presided over involving minorities. The color drains from Harmon's face. The implications are clear. His entire judicial legacy is now at risk. Every ruling, every sentence, every dismissal will be scrutinized through the lens of his revealed prejudice. As the agents guide Harmon down from the bench, Marcus steps back, allowing them space. He catches Elena Rodriguez's eye. They share the briefest of nods, acknowledgement of a plan executed to perfection. The members of the Judicial Conduct Committee approach, one of them leaning toward Marcus. We've suspected for years but could never prove it, the woman says quietly. Thank you, Detective. As Harmon is led past the witness stand in handcuffs, something unexpected happens. The disgraced judge pauses, turns slightly, and leans toward Marcus. You think this ends with me? Harmon whispers, his voice so low only Marcus can hear. You have no idea how deep this goes. They'll never let this stand. Before Marcus can respond, Harmon is pulled away. But not before Marcus catches something disturbing. A smile. Small, knowing, confident. Not the expression of a man whose world has just collapsed. Marcus scans the courtroom, suddenly alert to new dangers. He notices Senator Williams hurriedly making a call, turning away to shield his words. In the far corner, partially hidden by a pillar, stands a figure Marcus doesn't recognize, expensively dressed, observing everything with cold calculation before silently slipping out a side door. The hairs on the back of Marcus's neck rise. Harmon's whispered threat replays in his mind. You have no idea how deep this goes. A heavy realization settles over Marcus. This victory, as satisfying as it is, may have only revealed the tip of something far more dangerous. He's not just taken down a corrupt judge, he's potentially exposed a network that won't take this challenge lying down. As the agents escort Judge Harmon through the central doors, the once powerful man turns his head slightly. For a fraction of a second, his eyes meet Marcus's across the crowded room. The look contains no remorse, no defeat, only a cold promise. This isn't over. The doors close behind them with finality, but Marcus knows with absolute certainty. Today wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. Late afternoon sunlight slants across the courthouse steps as cameras flash and microphones cluster like hungry mouths. The arrest of Judge Richard Harmon has ignited a media firestorm. Every news outlet in the state has descended upon the courthouse, desperate for the inside story. Marcus Washington stands uncomfortably at the edge of the hastily assembled podium. He never wanted to be the face of this investigation, but circumstances have thrust him into the spotlight. His tie feels too tight. The Kevlar vest he now wears beneath his shirt, a precaution insisted upon by Agent Chen, makes him sweat despite the cool autumn air. District Attorney Elena Rodriguez takes the lead at the microphones, her professional demeanor masking the triumph he knows she feels. Today marks a significant victory in our ongoing fight against corruption in our justice system, she announces, her voice strong and clear. Judge Richard Harmon has been charged with accepting bribes, obstruction of justice, and witness intimidation. This arrest is the culmination of an 11-month joint investigation between the District Attorney's Office and the FBI. A reporter shouts from the crowd, "Is it true the judge made racist remarks to Detective Washington?" Rodriguez glances at Marcus, silently asking permission. He gives a slight nod. Judge Harmon's prejudicial comments were captured on a legally authorized recording device and will form part of the evidence against him, she confirms. They also raise serious questions about his previous rulings, particularly those involving minority defendants and plaintiffs. Another reporter pushes forward. Detective Washington, how does it feel to bring down one of the most powerful judges in the state? Marcus steps reluctantly to the microphone. This isn't about one man bringing down another. This is about upholding the ideals of justice that should apply equally to everyone, regardless of their position or power. As the questions continue, Marcus spots familiar faces in the crowd. Captain Reynolds stands at the back, arms crossed, nodding with quiet pride. Several officers from the precinct have gathered, showing solidarity. And at the edge of the crowd, Marcus's wife Vanessa and their teenage son Jamal watch with a mixture of pride and concern. The press conference ends, and Marcus makes his way through congratulatory handshakes and pats on the back to reach his family. Vanessa's embrace is tight, almost desperate. "You didn't tell me how dangerous this was," she whispers against his ear. "I didn't want you to worry," he responds, holding her close. Jamal's eyes are wide with a new understanding of his father's work. "Dad, you're trending on social media. They're calling you a hero." Marcus shakes his head. "I'm just doing my job, son." Captain Reynolds approaches, his expression serious despite the victory. "We need to talk security," he says in a low voice. "Harmon has friends in high places. We've already received some concerning calls at the precinct." As if to emphasize his point, Marcus's phone buzzes with a text message from an unknown number. "You should have stayed in your lane, detective." Share this video right now if you believe in standing up against corruption and prejudice, no matter the cost. 3 days later, the investigation expands like ripples in a pond. Marcus sits in the FBI's downtown field office, surrounded by evidence boards and computer screens. Agent Chen projects a complex network diagram on the wall. "Harmon was just one node in a much larger web," Chen explains, using a laser pointer to highlight connections. "His financial records have given us links to 3 other judges, 2 state representatives, and a deputy mayor." Elena Rodriguez taps a file folder against the table thoughtfully. "And all connect back to Maxwell Industries. Their environmental violations have disproportionately affected minority neighborhoods for years. When those communities tried to seek justice, they found themselves in Harmon's courtroom," Marcus finishes, "or in front of one of his associates. The recordings you obtained didn't just catch Harmon's racism," Chen adds. "They gave us enough to secure additional warrants. We're moving on the entire network." Over the following weeks, the case expands exponentially. Marcus works 18-hour days, following money trails and building evidence packages. Each morning brings news of another arrest, another official brought to justice. State Representative Thomas Jenkins, caught on wiretap discussing payoffs from Maxwell. Deputy Mayor Patricia Wilson, discovered with offshore accounts matching payment patterns identical to Harmon's. Judge Michael Larson, exposed for dismissing 3 separate class action lawsuits from minority communities affected by Maxwell's pollution. The corruption had spread like cancer through the city's institutions. But now, finally, it was being excised, not without cost. The threatening messages to Marcus increase. His home address is leaked online. The department assigns a patrol car to his street. Vanessa and Jamal temporarily relocate to her sister's house in another state, a precaution that tears at Marcus's heart, but which he knows is necessary. One evening, reviewing case files, Marcus discovers something unexpected in Harmon's background. Photos from 30 years ago show a young Richard Harmon marching for civil rights, standing alongside community leaders demanding equal justice. Articles quote his passionate speeches about reforming the system from within. "What happened to you?" Marcus whispers to the faded image. "What turned you into the man I met in that courtroom?" Later investigations reveal a complex story. Harmon's early idealism gradually eroded through decades of political pressure and personal disappointments. A bitter divorce, a son who died of an overdose, financial troubles that made him vulnerable to the first bribe. And then another, and another. Understanding doesn't excuse, but it reminds Marcus of the vigilance required to maintain one's moral compass in a system that constantly tests it. 1 year later, Marcus stands on a different stage. The community center in his old neighborhood is packed with residents, officers, and city officials. The plaque they present him reads, "For courage in the pursuit of justice." Marcus feels strange accepting recognition for simply doing what was right. But he understands the importance of symbols, of showing others, especially the young people watching, that standing up for what's right can make a difference. After the ceremony, a journalist approaches him for an update on the case that changed everything. Former Judge Harmon was sentenced to 15 years, Marcus reports. 5 of his associates received similar sentences. Maxwell Industries paid a record settlement to the affected communities and is under court-ordered environmental compliance monitoring. And the judicial reforms, the journalist prompts. The state has implemented new transparency requirements for judicial rulings, Marcus explains. All judges must now disclose potential conflicts of interest, and a civilian oversight board reviews complaints of bias. But the most meaningful conversation comes later that evening. Marcus sits on the back porch of their home. They've finally felt safe enough to return, sharing a quiet moment with Jamal. "I've decided what I want to do after graduation," his son says suddenly. "Law school?" Marcus guesses, remembering Jamal's earlier interest. "Criminal justice," Jamal corrects him. "Maybe the FBI eventually." Marcus studies his son's face in the fading light. "Because of what happened with Harmon?" Jamal nods. "I saw what one person could do when they refused to look the other way. You always told me the system only works when good people step up, but I never really understood what that meant until I saw you do it." Pride swells in Marcus's chest, alongside a father's natural concern. "It's not an easy path," he cautions. "The important ones never are," Jamal replies, echoing words Marcus has said many times before. Later that night, as the house grows quiet, Marcus stands at his bedroom window. The street below is peaceful. The patrol car is gone, no longer needed. Life has returned to normal, or at least a new version of normal. Yet Marcus knows the fight is far from over. Corruption doesn't end with one case or one conviction. It requires constant vigilance, courage, and people willing to stand up when it would be easier to stay silent. His phone buzzes with a text from Agent Chen. "New case. Possible judicial misconduct in the Western District. Meeting tomorrow, 8 a.m. Marcus sends back a simple reply. "I'll be there." He thinks about the journey of the past year, from that tense moment in Harmon's courtroom to the systemic changes now taking root. About the price paid and the progress made. About his son following in his footsteps. Some battles are worth fighting, no matter the cost. Some principles must be defended, even against the most powerful opponents. And sometimes, just sometimes, justice prevails. Not easily, not without sacrifice, but decisively and irrevocably. As Marcus turns from the window, he knows one thing with absolute certainty. When faced with injustice tomorrow, he'll make the same choice again. Because that's who he is. That's who he's always been.